today I'm going to be doing another try a volume video. This time I have 9 volumes of manga to talk about, which is quite a few, so I'm going to go through these kind of quickly, but also I wrote more thoughts and notes than usual, so we'll see what happens. There is a new publisher featured in this list of manga, which is great, and that publisher is Kana. So the first volume I read for this video is called Leviathan. This is volume 1, obviously. This is a sci-fi story that's told in kind of a dual timeline. There's basically this giant destroyed ship in outer space, and this group of looters decide to board the ship to try to find some cool things. Instead, they find a journal written by a student who is one of the group of students who was on this vessel when it was destroyed. This student's account makes it clear that there was a lot more going on than just a destroyed ship. And so we also get the story that is in the journal, and here we see this group of students who, yes, the ship gets damaged, but that is really not what ends up killing all these people. Instead, these students end up turning on each other, hoping to survive this dilemma, and so you have this really suspenseful narrative. I do think the dual timeline thing might take away a tiny bit of the suspense, because we do see kind of what happens to the ship in the time with the looters. We know that the ship is abandoned. That's a really minor thing, though. I do think this is a really interesting survival psychological horror manga, and I think having it set in space on this giant eerie spaceship that has been damaged really sets the tone very well. You can't really get more isolated than that. There are very few situations I can think of where you are more helpless than being on a destroyed spaceship in the middle of outer space. So it allows a really deep dive into the psychological consequences of the situation, the fact that these are just a bunch of kids having to survive on their own, but survive for what? They don't know if they're going to be rescued. And yeah, I think that's all I want to say about this. I definitely enjoyed it. I think this is going to be a shorter series, which is probably a good thing. I do enjoy this release from Kana. It has a dust jacket, which I'm not crazy about, but I could take it or leave it. I don't see that as a general positive for a volume, but it's okay. I do like the sprayed edges. They're cool. I don't think I've ever seen sprayed edges on a manga before, at least not a normal volume of manga. My only complaint with the release of this manga is the fact that the synopsis is too long, and you will see that's kind of a theme for the publications by Kana so far that I've read. The synopses just seem too long, they say too much. But that's just a really minor complaint. It doesn't really matter, especially if you're someone like me who doesn't read the synopsis of anything, then it's fine. So yeah, this was definitely a good start to this group of manga. Next, I'm going to talk about another release by Kana. Also, another horror manga. I promise these are not all horror manga. I'm going to have them all linked below so you can skip around if you like. It's going to seem like there's lots of horror manga though, but it's just really this beginning part, I think. Anyway, next I read Manhole, Volume 1. Also by Kana. This one is in a smaller trim size. Also has the dust jacket. Also has the very long synopsis. This is one I'm going to encourage you not to read the synopsis for. I will tell you what you should know about it. Basically, one day there's a naked, bloody man walking in the middle of the street, and he suddenly dies. And there's these 2 investigators. We see them on the back here. They are called to investigate his death. And that's literally all I'm going to say. There's some more on the back if you want to know more details. I will give a warning. This is definitely a horror manga. It is gross. If you have any issues with eyeballs or bugs, probably skip this, especially the eyeballs. Do not eat while reading this manga. If you like horror manga, I think you will like this, but it is definitely gross and not for the faint of heart, I would say. But I really enjoyed this. It was different than I thought it would be. And these characters definitely end up in a bigger situation than they were expecting, just investigating a mysterious death. This is also going to be another short series, only 3 volumes, I believe, which I think is perfect for a series like this. And I don't really know what else I can say about this other than I really enjoyed it. It's very suspenseful. I liked the mystery. I kind of liked how gross it was. I don't know what that says about me, but since I can't spoil anything, that's about all I have to say about this one. I promise we will go into more details in some of the other ones that I can talk about, but I did enjoy it. If you like horror manga and you aren't going to be super traumatized by those things I mentioned, then give it a try. It's a short series, so yeah. Next, I read the last horror volume 1 in this video, I believe. So this one is definitely different from those other 2, while those ones are kind of going into the human psyche, really more in depth. This one is more supernatural. This is called Beetle Hands Volume 1, also not a manga. I think it's a webtoon. That's what it says on the back anyway. I do not really read webtoons. Honestly, I only picked this up because the cover is cool and because it's a horror series, and I will give pretty much any horror series a try. So this follows a guy, I can't remember his name, but his friend, who I do remember his name is Kenma. I only remember that because of Haikyuu. Anyway, his friend basically calls him up. They don't really talk to each other anymore. They were childhood friends, but they've become estranged. His friend calls him up and says, hey, there's someone following me, I think. Can I, come to your house and kind of avoid this person that's following me? I don't really know what to do. So this guy allows his friend to come to his house, and then really strange things start happening. The house becomes like this weird haunted nightmare thing, and there's all these hands, which are not metaphorical. They are really just giant hands chasing these characters around a lot. And they're basically trapped in this house that is forcing them to revisit their memories and stuff like that. It's creepy, I will say, 100%. Some of the art is very, very creepy, and I think that's the best selling point for this series. The actual story, I was not that impressed by. I totally understand what it's trying to do with these two characters who used to be childhood friends, kind of rebonding, I guess, over their traumatizing experience, just realizing the friendship that they had that they no longer have through their memories. I totally understand. But I do think this series has some pacing issues for sure. They run away from these giant red hands over and over and over and over and over again, and I just don't think that's very enjoyable. Maybe it is just the webtoons storytelling style that I don't enjoy. That could certainly be a thing. I do also want to mention that I feel like this is a series I should have been reading on my phone in the dark or something like that, because I do feel like reading it in the dark would have made it better, but the problem is the paper is so glossy that if you were to try to read it in the dark with a light behind you, it would just shine on the really dark images and you wouldn't be able to see anything, which is a problem when you're trying to read. So I won't be reading any more of this. I just didn't connect to the characters. I understood what it was trying to do, but I wasn't impressed with the execution of that. So yeah, I do think it was creepy though. I want to show you some images. What is going on here? I don't know, but it's gross and creepy. So the art, great. The rest, I wasn't impressed by. So personally, I'm not going to continue this, but it could be a me thing for sure. Next, I read Versus Volume 1. So this is by the same author as One Punch Man and Mob Psycho 100. I've read some of One Punch Man. I can't remember how many volumes. And I never got to read Mob Psycho 100, but I picked this up. I didn't really know anything about it. I just saw some people saying it was good, and I like fun fantasy series, and that's what the cover looks like. So I picked it up without knowing a single thing. And I think that's what you should do if you enjoy fun fantasy manga. Do the exact same thing I did. This was unlike anything I could have predicted. The synopsis of this one does not give too much away, that's for sure. And I, again, can't really talk about it. Basically, this is a fantasy story, and in this world, there's a bunch of really powerful demons that attack humans. The humans try to, send their strongest fighters to fight the demons and protect humanity. However, it does not work out for them, and the humans are pretty much killed every single time. There are some mages in this world, though, and they seem to think that they have a solution to this demon problem, and they enact their plan, and then that's where it goes from there, and that's literally all I'm going to say. I will mention that this manga has some of my favorite things, but I cannot say what they are without spoiling it. I can say that I think the art is really, really good. It's easy to follow. The demons especially have really cool character designs. I had a really fun time with this. If you, again, like something with fun adventure with a twist, then try this out. If you are sick of fun adventure stories, I love a fun adventure, so I'm never sick of that. But if you don't care for that, shonen adventure, feel-good type stuff, I would probably skip this, but it is unique for sure. I will say that I'm not sure how this manga is going to avoid becoming repetitive. I feel like the gimmick could become stale pretty early on, especially if this is going to be a long series. I could definitely see this being a problem. However, I know that the author has done some interesting things with manga before, so I'm sure he has a plan. But that is going to be my biggest thing that I look for when I read future volumes, is if the gimmick is becoming stale or the manga seems to lack direction, but I will be continuing, so I will keep you updated on that for sure. But this one was definitely very fun and not what I was expecting at all. Next up, I read Eden of Witches, Volume 1. This is the final volume from Kana in this video. Again, has a dust jacket, has a very, very long synopsis that I feel like is not quite necessary, but this one I think does have the coolest cover under the dust jacket. So we can see this, and here is our main character on the back as well. So I read this and Verses on the same day, and I thought that was very funny because in Verses, the humans are definitely the victims. They're constantly attacked by the demons, and they are the victims, right? In this one, the humans are 100% the villains of the story. So this takes place in a world where humans have pretty much destroyed the environment, all the animals and the plants, and the only beings that are able to kind of communicate with the plants are witches that we see on the frontier. So the world is now a barren wasteland, and because the witches have these powers to speak to nature, they're kind of feared, but also wanted for their powers a little bit. They're also kind of blamed for the destruction of nature in the first place, even though it was definitely the humans who did it. So anyway, they are all in hiding. One day though, the humans find our main character here. Her name is Peely, and she is basically hiding with this mentor slash grandmother-like figure on the back, but she has to go on the run to avoid the humans, and she is joined by this giant plant wolf monster thing, which is very cool. I'm going to show you a picture. So here's the plant wolf thing that she is joined by. So they basically just have to run away from the humans. And first thing I want to talk about is, of course, the art. You can see the art on the cover here, but the art is absolutely stunning. I think out of all the ones I read for this video, it has the best art. Here is the opening image. The color pages especially are just beautiful. And in addition to the art being beautiful, I feel like the story being told is beautiful as well. Obviously, we have the super evil humans who are trying to kill the witches. In fact, there's a very gruesome, like, burned at the stake scene in here that I was not expecting. So we got humans doing terrible things. They destroyed nature, they ruined their own world, that sort of thing. However, it's of course not that straightforward because there are humans who go out of their way to help Peely, to show her kindness, to give her food, and they are definitely kind-hearted. I also really love any kind of plant power or magic in manga. I feel like the imagery of that, if they do it well, looks really, really amazing, and this one definitely does it well. I feel like if you enjoy like high-stakes thriller type manga, you might enjoy this. Even though it's a fantasy manga, it does kind of have that feeling of being on the run from the government, except it's not the government, it's just humans. It also really has this like fairy tale like feel. It's very magical and captivating. So I'm definitely interested in picking up more of this. I do like that Kana has also done this fantasy release in addition to the other two horror manga that I mentioned. I feel like well-rounded group so far. I know they have more manga coming out in the next few months that I will be picking up for sure. We'll see if they are able to continue with their scheduled releases. Hopefully they do. Sometimes smaller publishers kind of struggle with that, but hopefully they do a good job. I want them to succeed because the manga they're releasing so far have been really, really amazing. So this is one I highly recommend for most readers, I would say, as long as you can deal with some of the darker subject matter. The next manga I read for this video was After God Volume 1. I don't really know how to give you a synopsis of this other than the fact that there are these giant gods invaded Japan. At least that's what the synopsis says, but I'm pretty sure they invaded other places on Earth too. This is not a good sign if I can't even give you a synopsis after having read the volume. But now there's like danger zones in Japan that you can't enter because the gods have influence there. And there's this group of researchers basically trying to figure out how they can fight back against the gods to reclaim their city, I guess. So if you couldn't tell, this manga is very messy and not in a good way. It just lacks any kind of attention to detail, I feel like. So the world building especially makes absolutely no sense to me. We have these giant creatures that appeared and seemingly attacked cities, and governments fought back by using bombs and other weapons to attack them without success, but citizens were kind of caught in the crossfire, injured, killed, stuff like that. Apparently, because of this, Tokyo is now nearly deserted, but society functions like mostly normally in other places, in even kind of in Tokyo. Kids go to school. We see them going to school. There's like regular convenience stores. The news happens normally, and the internet, and we see other jobs happening. There's a research facility that I've mentioned. It has staff, and I'm not just talking about like the scientists. It has actual people who like work in the kitchens, but seemingly no one lives in Tokyo except for homeless people. It doesn't make sense. I'm just not convinced by this nearly apocalyptic situation that it's trying to present to the reader. It really doesn't connect. I do think, as you can see from the cover, the imagery is cool enough. It's a little edgy, but I don't mind that. In fact, I kind of like edgy imagery, if you couldn't tell. And I also like the philosophical discussions that we seem to be having here. You have these things called gods, and humans are trying to fight them. So you have gods versus humanity, but also kind of like, do humans have to become monsters to fight the monsters? I think it is an interesting topic that I've read several times before, but I never get sick of it. But I just don't think that this executed that well at all. It also has some comedy elements that I think are absolutely just horrible for the tone of the manga. At the beginning, there's some comedy, which I thought was really annoying because it just did not fit. And then later on, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but there's this talking cat, and it's just ruined by this talking cat. Nothing I've ever read has ever been ruined by a talking cat, I don't think, but there is absolutely no place, in my opinion, for this talking cat. It just doesn't make any sense. It's supposed to be comedic, but no, it doesn't fit. So this is going to sound really mean, but I feel like this manga right here is just the epitome of everything I've really disliked about new manga coming out, especially the last year. It just doesn't have a focus. It wants to shock the reader with cool images and stuff like that, but it just doesn't deliver on the promise of the manga and is not well thought out, and I don't know what is happening. It's just another style over substance thing. I don't think this manga was thought out in any way. At least it doesn't feel like it. If it was, it's not executed very well, and it just did nothing to make me want to continue. I couldn't tell you a thing about any of these characters really, and yeah. So this one is definitely not recommended by me, and I will obviously not be continuing. Next up, I read the Spellbook Library Volume 1. So this one I picked up because it's by the author of Is Love the Answer. It has really nothing in common with that manga at all, but I wanted to give it a try. I like fantasy manga. I haven't been reading too many of them lately, but this one seemed like a good one to give a try. And I must say that this has pretty much all the elements of a forgettable fantasy manga. And I'm going to try to do my best to describe what I mean, and hopefully you get it and you recognize what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about like the actual manga, not the story, the actual manga. Like, it has really thin lines, so many speech bubbles, dialogue all over the page, really busy with just like sound effects everywhere, as you can see on this page a little bit. And the art is a little bit hard to follow, it's not amazing, and comedy that just doesn't always work. So I feel like I've read so many manga that just feel like this. So hopefully you know what I'm talking about. There are quite a few manga I've read that have all of these elements, and I just put them all in a pile, and I couldn't tell you any of the details about any of them. Now, having said that, I did really enjoy this volume. I was a bit nervous at the beginning because, again, they started out with some comedy that just didn't work because we don't know these characters, so we don't know their character quirks, so it's not going to be funny, unfortunately. As the story progresses, though, we get to know these characters and their quirks, and then the comedy bits actually become funny because we know who these characters are and why what they're saying is funny. The rest of the manga, I would say, was good, enjoyable, but definitely not great. I do enjoy a magical school setting, and I feel like this is not quite that, but it does give that feeling. Both of our main characters, this guy on the cover here, and then the other guy that I can't remember the name of, but he's kind of this jock guy. Actually, it's kind of funny because he looks like the stereotypical, like, nerd character, but he actually just beats people up when they make him mad. Anyway, both of these characters have this kind of mysterious past that I think we'll learn more about. They don't know each other, they meet because they want to become librarians in the Spellbook Library for different reasons. The one thing I was not aware of with this manga is the fact that it was released for English-speaking audiences first. So it was released in English, it was not released in Japanese and then translated, I think through Kodansha, through their I guess, reader portal series on the back. That's what it says. But it was published in English first, and the author's note at the end mentions this and how the author had to try to create a story that would appeal to Americans. And honestly, I don't really understand how this is different from any other manga I've read. I'm not seeing anything that convinces me that this was made for an American audience. I don't really know what that would even look like, but I wasn't getting it, which is it's not a problem. It's actually a good thing that this doesn't seem like it was made for a different audience than the typical manga are made for, if that made any sense. So I didn't notice anything different about the storytelling style, the subject matter, anything like that. I also liked at the end, the author mentioned that they wanted to focus on the themes of friendship, victory, and effort, which sounds like your typical shonen adventure manga, which of course I really enjoy. I like all those things, especially friendship and effort. I like reading those things in manga. So as I usually do, I did go ahead and read some Goodreads reviews after reading this volume, and lots of people are calling this boring, giving it 3 stars, which I totally understand. It is definitely not mind-blowing. We don't know a lot about these characters yet, but I just like friendship-focused stories, and this manga feels almost nostalgic, even though there's nothing really nostalgic about it. I don't know, it's just fun. I do think there's plenty of potential for this manga because it has these kind of spell beast things. They're basically beasts that are trapped in books in this giant library, and there's many things you could do with that. And the world outside this library is huge. There's plenty to explore there if the author decides to go that way. So I could definitely see this being a long series, and depending on how it's executed, I wouldn't mind. So I will be continuing this, but I can totally see where the reviews are coming from, saying it's boring. I did not find it boring. I thought it was fun, but it's just not the most unique thing I've ever read, so I understand the criticisms. Next up, I read a manga that is incredibly popular right now, and that is the guy she was interested in wasn't a guy at all. And first of all, I don't like these titles that do this, that give the synopsis and the title. I know it's a whole thing, but I don't really like them. Because of my track record with reading super hyped manga in the past year or so, I was really wary of trying this out because I did not want to hate it. It has a really high rating on Goodreads with like 6,000 ratings, and it's at like a 4.6, which if you don't use Goodreads, that's a really high rating for especially the first volume of a manga. So based on my track record, I was expecting to hate this, but thankfully I didn't hate it. However, I do not think I enjoyed it as much as everybody else does. I do think the first half of this volume was much more enjoyable than the second half. When we're seeing the situation, it's funny, this character doesn't recognize her own classmate when she's dressed like this and has a crush on her. That part was fun. I enjoy the characters. They're fun, especially the uncle character. Of course, everybody likes him, but I like our main characters as well. In fact, this manga felt really relatable to me when I was like a high schooler, as these two are, and they are constantly talking about these bands that they enjoy, and then people around them are like, who listens to that, right? So they kind of feel like outcasts, and I feel like I'm gonna embarrass myself telling this story. But when I was in high school, I was in this math class, and all the other kids were older than me, so I really didn't say anything. I was very quiet. But then one day, either like the last day of the year or like the last day before winter break, one of those school days where you don't actually do any school, the teacher did this game thing where it was like he played music and then we had to guess the song and the band. And I won that many times. I knew what all the songs were because they were like Rush and like REO Speedwagon and Styx and Aerosmith and Journey and bands that maybe high school kids wouldn't know normally. In fact, I answered so many times that the teacher told me, hey, you have to stop answering so other people can maybe answer. But like half the time, nobody else knew what the song was, and I did. Anyway, so yes, I did feel very cool that day, and I don't think I've gotten any better about stuff like that. But anyway, so these girls definitely feel relatable to me. They are often quiet, especially this girl here, but whenever people want to talk about bands or music comes up, she has lots of stuff to talk about. And I guess it kind of makes more sense for these characters because they are in Japan and they are listening to Western music, whereas with me, it was just probably annoying. The point of the story is these characters feel realistic to me, which is a good thing. So anyway, I will say that I wish this was a one-shot, like really badly. I feel like this would have been much better as a one-shot. It definitely drags. Each of these chapters are quite short, and I just feel like it would have been better paced and there would have been better story progression as a one-shot. There's also lots of miscommunication in here. If that bothers you, I know that's a deal breaker for some people. I was fine with it, but there is quite a bit of it. Overall, I'm glad I gave it a chance. It was quite funny, and I did definitely enjoy the first half of this volume, but I'm not sure I'm going to continue it. I'll have to read some more reviews. Probably not on Goodreads because they're all just saying the same thing, but I will have to read more reviews to see what other people are talking about in the next couple volumes. I don't know how long the series is going to be. I know it's ongoing, but I just don't feel like this should have been more than one volume, so we'll see. So I read one Yuri manga and one BL manga as well, except this is not a manga. This is another webtoon. So this is Semantic Error Volume 1. This was actually sent to me by Yen Press, which I'm very thankful for. Thanks, Yen Press. Actually, also Ize Press. So this is a story about these two guys, and they basically get off on the wrong foot and really struggle to fix it. Our main guy here, he is in a group project in school, in college, and his other group members he feels are slackers, and through various circumstances he ends up doing the entire project himself, and he tells his teacher that, and his professor goes, okay, so he fails all the other students, and one of those students is this guy right here, and he basically wants his revenge. He was going to graduate, but now he can't because he failed this class. So, through various circumstances, he basically goes out of his way to annoy this guy and just disrupt his routine and just really bother him at every opportunity. And that's pretty much what the story is. It's a little silly, and I do feel like I was worried this was going to become like a bullying situation, but I feel like it never really gets that far. So even though this guy is definitely a jerk, I feel like our main character here almost gives as good as he gets because he is also quite rude, and not just to this guy. Like, he meets this girl and he ends up helping her out with something even though she had to ask him to help her out with it. Anyway, she offers to buy him lunch, so they go to this restaurant where this guy works. But the point is that he says, oh, I'm going to buy the most expensive thing on the menu, which, I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world, but that just feels rude to me. When he's eating lunch with someone and he finishes before them, he just gets up and leaves. And lots of people around him just call him blunt and cold. So, meanwhile, this guy is kind of like a people pleaser, and he realizes that he really wants this guy to pay attention to him. And so, yeah, that's where the story goes. It's not anything serious. I do think it was pretty funny. I laughed out loud quite a few times, and I definitely enjoyed the whole like rivalry / enemies dynamic happening here, especially since a lot of it is pretty silly. As I mentioned, this definitely could have gone into a bullying route, but I feel like it didn't quite get that far, especially since we can see from the perspective of this guy here and what he's trying to do, why he's doing these things. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed my time reading this. It was fun. I feel like I haven't read a BL in a while, and definitely not one like this in a while, so that was kind of refreshing, I guess. So I definitely plan on continuing this. I thought it was pretty fun, and I actually did already start reading it on whatever app this is on. Side note, does anyone else get dizzy reading webtoons on their phone, or is it just me? Because it's really difficult. You have to scroll for every single panel, and I just feel like I get kind of dizzy. But anyway, this was good. It's pretty popular, I think, so I feel like I don't have to sell it to anyone who is already interested in BL. I feel like they'll have heard of this series, especially if they read webtoons. But yeah, I had a fun time with it, so thanks so much to Yen Press / Ize Press for sending it to me. So the last couple times I've done this video, I've actually forgotten to go back and rank the volumes at the end like I prefer to do, so I did not forget this time. So here we have these ranked by how much I want to continue reading them, from most to least. And I feel bad because the only two I'm definitely not planning on continuing are After God, which I do not feel bad about, and Beetle Hands. And then I'm just not sure if I'm going to continue this one, so unfortunately it had to go next. Spellbook Library, I found fun enough to continue. Semantic Error, I've already started continuing. Versus, I put here just because I feel like, depending on how it's executed, it could succeed or fail as it continues, like all of these could. Leviathan was a really interesting suspense series that left me wanting more, and Manhole is kind of similar, but just a different setting and tone. But I do feel like Eden of Witches was the one I was most interested in reading more of right away. So yeah, that's my ranking. If you've read any of these manga and you have thoughts on them, whether you agree with me or disagree with me, please leave your comments down below. But that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!